Now that we know the final DLC for Total War Warhammer 2 will be the Silence and the Fury and feature the Beastmen and the Lizardmen, the internet can't help itself but to speculate on what units will be included in the DLC as well. But in this video, we'll be doing exactly the same thing, actually. Hi, I'm the voice behind the Noobs Guides videos, and for people who've been watching this channel for a long time, you'll also recognize me as the guy who couldn't figure out where to put his pin in some of his videos. As speculation videos are exactly that, speculation videos, I couldn't help but think that maybe the better way of presenting this to you would be just a sit-down conversation. When it comes to speculation about DLC, the internet tends to come up with its own consensus very quickly, and in the case of the Silence and the Fury, we have an excellent visual aid, created by Kumamon, created by Kumamon09, who I just realized was probably born in 2009. That's why he is named that way, which makes me feel really old. He breaks down the DLC into two parts, the Beastman side and the Lizardman side. And one of the reasons I actually haven't made this video earlier is that I basically agree with like 90% of it. It almost exactly follows the notes that I made for myself. For the Beastman side, you could actually go back and watch my Beastman prediction video from 3 months ago, and it's still completely valid. But for those that haven't seen it, here's the brief rundown. Beastmen currently only have one generic General Lord, so if they're going to release a Minotaur Lord DLC, it makes sense to add another Minotaur Lord here. It gives them a tankier, more hardy option, and as always, gives a generic version of the named Lord for the DLC. Wargors would be another hero unit available, as currently Beastmen either have a magic caster or a Minotaur option, but nothing that's a fast melee hybrid duelist character to really put in there for some extra punch. For unit choices, Tuskgore Chariots and Gorgons make a lot of sense. Tuskgore Chariots would be a low-tier cavalry chariot option available much earlier in Beastman campaigns, because one of the problems in Beastman campaigns is you have a hard time getting up enough steam to then snowball and do the damage you need to do. So giving them access to something that moves fast and hits harder earlier in the game is win-win for everyone. Gorgons have been a requested addition to the game for some time now. They are a large, anti-large, fast, basically anti-cavalry unit. So you run them around and intercept enemy cavalry forces and just shred them to bits, which sounds awesome for a reason. It is. The Jabberslythe, though, I'm not as convinced about. Mainly because I don't like Jabberslythes. I think that visually, they don't match the rest of the Beastmen roster. If your whole shtick is being large, hairy, angry guys that run up and hit things, a giant flying, scaly, skinny monster doesn't really work the same, and it doesn't fit. It's interesting that the Praeton, which was added later in the Monstrous Arcanum, kind of fits the same role of being a large, monstrous, flying unit that you use to harass enemy backlines and just drop into the middle of wherever you're having problems. I personally feel it's equally likely that either one could appear, Jabberslythe or Praeton, as they do basically the same thing. Now, one thing I didn't mention just then was the Great Bray Shaman, which would effectively give the Beastmen a caster full general option. And that's because it's so needed for them, it's probably going to be a free DLC through Total War Access. For the Lizardman DLC, we actually already know 2 of the Lizardman units. Chameleon Stalker units are based on the old champions for the Chameleon block back on the tabletop days, and the Creative Assembly has done this before, where the one captain would then become their whole new unit, so that's fairly standard. But in this case, it's going to give you extra sneaky skink guys wandering around being light harassing units, and that seems to be the general idea behind all of Oxyottl's DLC, at least in this prediction, as that will also be how Oxyotl plays. The Coatl unit would be a large, flying, feathered serpent that is based on Quetzalcoatl from Aztec myth. It's unlikely to be as powerful as something like a dragon, but instead flies around and provides that final third tier of air domination support for the Lizardmen. The fact that both Quetzalcoatl and the Chameleon Stalkers have feathers on their hair also seems to be going towards a theming for the Lizardmen. And I'm a sucker for good theming in units. I like a faction to feel like it goes together. So when this DLC was announced, a unit that had not been on anyone's radar because it's so old suddenly popped back up again. And that's the Kulchan riders. They're skinks riding basically on the back of terror birds, which went extinct sometime during the last ice age and were found originally in South America, Argentina region, which also happens to be where they're found in the game. They're interesting because they fill a gap currently in the Lizardman roster that I've honestly never thought about, which is light cavalry. Kulchan riders would be skinks, either with melee weapons or possibly with javelins, on the back of these light birds that then run around and skirmish. Yet again, making Oxyotls faction based around light units moving quickly and skirmishing, which is basically the exact opposite of how you play the Lizardman normally, and should be really interesting to play as. They could very well also release it as just a feral variant, where you have the Kulchans just running around the battlefield pecking people like giant angry chickens. The last unit to appear in this wish list is the Skink Oracle riding a Troglodyte, which is rather unique since the Skink Oracle is always mounted on this particular mount. It's actually blind and uses like feelers to walk around and spits venom, and it's basically a superpowered Carnosaur with a spellcaster strapped to its back. It may seem like something of an odd choice to include, but the Creative Assembly has previously said that they want to try and get everything from the 8th edition books into the game. The only thing I really disagree about with this particular prediction is the free LC Lords. I've released an entire video on this, but it basically boils down to none of the current rumors are backing these two guys. Although, I will say that I didn't think about Teto Echo as a legendary hero. Moonclaw for the Beastmen and Teto Echo are both overpowered super spellcasters, which CA seems to really like to include as legendary heroes. So if they were to be added as legendary lords, they'd be a bit unbalanced, so they make you work for them first. Teto Echo is an especially interesting choice as he has background history with Oxyotl. He actually advised the Lizardmen and fought alongside him at several points and has a tenuous connection to him in a way that makes sense to include him here. For those that don't know, Teto Echo is a skink riding on a Slan's palanquin. He's one of the few that ever be allowed this, as he has amazing gifts of foresight and very powerful magical abilities. He's also nearly 100 years old, making him just the dirtiest, oldest, skinkiest man imaginable. Put all these together and you have a really interesting idea of what could be coming up for the DLC, though I suspect we'll be getting the full trailer and the full reveal coming up in the very near future, so stay tuned for that. But what do you think? Do you think this is all a bit too pie in the sky, or do you think it's perfectly possible? And are these units giving you what you're looking for? Do they make you excited to play these factions? Leave those comments and your thoughts below. And if you enjoyed this video, or really any of the videos on the channel, make sure to subscribe to be notified of when others release, or join our Patreon and consider supporting the channel and all of its videos. But regardless, as always, thanks for watching. And now I have to sit here and try not to move because the credits will be playing. So I have to ignore the fly on my nose, which is on my nose.